Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Paul Cancelleri, and I'm the chair of the Wakefield Veterans Advisory Board. It's my honor this morning to serve as your moderator. Welcome to the Memorial Auditorium at the General Galvin Middle School, and happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. Memorial Auditorium at the Galvin Middle School is named in honor of many service members who lost their lives while serving in the military. Their faces at the entrance remind us of the true cost of freedom. General John Rogers Galvin served on active duty for 45 years, rising to the rank of 4-star general and the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. He's a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. His military career spanned from 1954 to 1992, serving in both the Vietnam and Cold War eras. His work in Europe during the Cold War was instrumental in ending the Cold War in Europe, ultimately removing the Berlin Wall. Following his military career, Galvin became the dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. And General Galvin was so fond of Wakefield that he set up international seminars for senior officers from the former Soviet Union that included a walk down Main Street, highlighting our town as a premier American town. This morning we have a host of honored guests. I want to just say good morning to our town council members, town council chair Jonathan Chines. Good morning. Our town council members Maureen Butt, Ann Dennehy, Edward Dombrowski, Michael McLean, Julie Smith Galvin, and of course today's honored guest speaker, Commander Robert E. Vincent II from the United States Navy, who retired from the United States Navy. Also, I want to just introduce the Veterans Advisory Board. Daniel Benjamin, Robert Ettinger, Christy Yentl, Miriam Dennehy, Joseph DeLeo, William Curran, Mark Young, Dale Finley, Chris Olson, and of course Dave Mangan, our Veteran Service Officer. I also want to welcome Steve Mayo, our town administrator, for his support. Thank you, Steve, for everything you do for our community. I also would like to welcome some representatives that have joined us today. We have the presence of Congressman Seth Moulton, Representative Donna Wong, Kate Lipper-Garabedian, State Senator Jason Lewis, who's also representing the 5th Middlesex District. A special welcome to Reverend Glenn Mortimer, who's a pastor of the Wakefield-Linfield Methodist Church. Reverend Mortimer has accepted the role as chaplain for the Veterans Day here in Wakefield. I'd like to welcome the performers of the award-winning Wakefield Memorial High School Wind Ensemble for joining us this morning. And I want to welcome our Boy Scouts from Troop 701 and our Wakefield Girl Scouts for serving as today's color guard. Good morning to the members of the American Legion, Post 63. And a welcome to our first responders, our Chief of Police, Chief Scory, and Chief Sullivan of the Wakefield Fire Department. Good morning also to Mr. Doug Lyons, Superintendent of Schools. The theme of today's program is service. American military service dates back to the forming of militias to protect our early settlements and colonies. As our colonies formed into states, our militias grew into the Guard. The Governor's Guard was founded in 1636 as a citizen force organized to protect families and towns from hostile attacks. Today's National Guard members either work or attend college full-time while maintaining their part-time military commitment. Following the battles at Lexington and Concord, April 19, 1775, the start of the American Revolution, militia units and volunteers from Massachusetts, along with other New England colonies, quickly converged on Cambridge. These units formed what became known as the New England Army of Observation. and put the British forces posted in Boston under siege. On June 14, 1775, the Continental Congress passed the following resolution. Resolved, that 6 companies of expert riflemen be immediately raised in Pennsylvania, 2 in Maryland, and 2 in Virginia, and that each company, as soon as completed, shall march and join the army near Boston to be there employed as light infantry under the command of the chief officer in that army. Of course, the next step was to select a commander-in-chief. George Washington of Virginia was the favored choice because of his military record and the hope that a leader from Virginia could further unite the colonies. Congress unanimously voted on the measure, and the next day presented Washington his commission. And it read in part, "We, reposing special trust and confidence in your patriotism, valor, conduct, and fidelity, do, by these presents, constitute and appoint you to be General and Commander-in-Chief of the Army of the United Colonies and of all the forces now raised, or to be raised by them, and of all others who shall voluntarily offer their service and join the said army for the defense of American liberty and for the repelling of every hostile invasion thereof. And you are hereby vested with full power and authority to act as you shall think for the good and welfare of the service." Thus, the Continental Congress commissioned George Washington as the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. General Washington traveled to Boston, taking command of the Continental Army in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The following year, on July 4, 1776, when Congress declared independence, the Continental Army and the militia in the service of Congress became known collectively as the Army of the United States, instead of the Army of the United Colonies. If you are currently serving or have ever served in the United States Army, the United States Marine Corps, the United States Navy, the United States Air Force, the United States Space Force, the United States Coast Guard, the National Guard, or the Reserves, please stand and be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our veterans and thank them for their service as members of the Armed Forces of America. I'm going to ask that the veterans please remain standing. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand alongside the veterans as we officially open the Town of Wakefield 2023 Veterans Day ceremony. The Wakefield Girl Scouts will please post the colors.
Color guard attention. Color guard advance. Color guard post the colors. Color guard honor the colors. Color guard dismissed.
Please remain standing.
Good morning. My name is Dale Finley. I'm a member of the Veterans Advisory Board. I have the honor to lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. So without further ado, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very, very much. I believe you can be seated.
No,
Nope, not yet.
Not
Sorry.
not yet. National anthem, Nadia. Right here? Okay.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please remain standing. Thank you, Nadia. Now I'll introduce Reverend Glenn Mortimer, the pastor of the Wakefield Linfield Methodist Church, who will lead us in our invocation.
Thank you and good morning. On this Veterans Day, as we gather conscious of the men and women who are at this very moment giving of themselves and willing to sacrifice their own lives to help others to be free, I hope as I pray for all of us this morning, you will think of those past and present who gave so much so that we could be here today. Please join me in prayer. God of peace, we pray for those who have served our nation and have laid down their lives to protect and defend our freedom. We pray for those who have fought, whose spirits and bodies are scarred by war, whose nights are haunted by memories too painful for the light of day. We pray for those who serve us now, especially for those in harm's way. Shield them from danger and bring them home. Turn the hearts and minds of our leaders and our enemies to the work of justice and a harvest of peace. May the peace you left us, the peace you gave us, be the peace that sustains, the peace that saves us. I pray this day in the name of our Lord. Amen.
Reverend, thank you very much. Please remain standing as I call Miriam Dennehy, member of the Veterans Advisory Board, to read the proclamation from Governor Maura Healey.
A proclamation. Whereas, since the Commonwealth's colonial days, thousands of men and women have served our country in defense of freedom and liberty. And whereas on November 11th, 1918, the armistice was signed in the forests of Campania by the Allied nations and Germany, ending World War I, the war to end all wars, after 4 years of conflict. And whereas, since that day, every November, people from around the nation have gathered to honor our veterans. And whereas, since that day, whereas there are approximately 300,000 veterans living in Massachusetts, and whereas today we are reminded of the great sacrifices and contributions our veterans have made to our country, and whereas we honor and salute those who served our country throughout the generations with honor, patriotism, and courage, and whereas it is appropriate that all Massachusetts veterans remember the bravery of those who served their country so that their dedication and sacrifices serve as a reminder of the cost of our freedom. And whereas in November 2023, the world will commemorate the 105th anniversary of the armistice that ended the fighting in World War I at 11 a.m. November 11th, 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Now whereas I, Maura T. Healy, Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2023 to be Veterans Day, and urge all residents of the Commonwealth to take cognizance of this event and participate fittingly in its observance. Given at the Executive Chamber in Boston this day of November in the year 2023, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 247th, by Her Excellency Maura T. Healy, Governor of the Commonwealth, Kimberly Driscoll, Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth, and William Francis Galvin, Secretary of the Commonwealth. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Marion, thank you very much, and thank you for representing us from the Gold Star Wives on the Veterans Advisory Board. Please take your seats. Just a quick note. Yesterday, downtown in Boston, Governor Healy presented a proposed legislation titled the HERO Act. And there's information at the entrance here that you can pick up on the way out, at the exit on your way out. But this is an act that's honoring, empowering, and recognizing our service members and veterans. The HERO Act proposes 17 spending and policy initiatives, tax credits, and statute changes organized into 3 buckets. Those buckets are benefit expansion, a commitment to inclusivity and greater representation, and the modernization of veteran services. There's a 2-page fact sheet that's available that I mentioned before. Please take that with you. It talks about the proposal. Many of them, the Veterans Advisory Board have been preparing and communicating with our legislators to go ahead and proceed with. Today I want to welcome, we have several generations of veterans. Just by a show of hands, are there any service members that are currently serving in the audience? Just by a show of hands. They're busy today. By a show of hands, veterans, just raise your hand if you've served in the global war on terror in post 9/11 in Iraq or Afghanistan. Thank you. Show of hands if you served in the Gulf War era, Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Again, a show of hands if you served in the Cold War. Those veterans who served in Vietnam during the Vietnam era, please raise your hands. And those veterans that served during the Korean War era, please raise your hands. Wow. Are there any veterans who served during World War II with us today? Thank you very much for your service. At this time, I'm going to welcome Councilor Jonathan Chines. He's the chair of our Wakefield Town Council, offering opening remarks on behalf of the Town Council. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Councilor Jonathan Chines.
Good morning, everyone. Chair Consigliere, Reverend Mortimer, distinguished guests and honorees, Gold Star families, and of course, our honored veterans who are with us this morning. It's my honor to welcome you here today on behalf of the town of Wakefield. I am so grateful this morning to be joined by some of our colleagues from both our federal and state legislative delegations. To Representative Seth Moulton from the U.S. Congress, thank you for being here. You have a big district, a lot of communities to see, and it's an honor to have you here in Wakefield. And it's an honor to know the work that you do on behalf of our veterans in Congress as a tireless advocate for veterans issues, particularly those veterans left behind by the GI Bill of Rights and other things. So thank you for being here this morning. My colleagues from our state delegation, State Representatives Kate Lipper-Garabedian and Donald Wong, and State Senator Jason Lewis, thank you for being here and always showing up for Wakefield. I'm also pleased to be here with Town Administrator Steve Mayo and several of my colleagues from the Town Council, Councilor Bob Vincent, Vice Chair Mike McLean, and Councilor Ann Danahy. I have a few colleagues who, this time of year being what is our home under the weather, but I know they're joining us online, watching us on WCAT, so grateful for their service and commitment as well. I do want to take a moment just to thank as well our keynote speaker today, Town Councilor Bob Vincent. You know, as you'll hear, and as those of us who work with Bob know, he is a man who has dedicated his life to both his country and his community. He's a man of commitment and integrity, and I know that I am proud to count him as one of my colleagues and one of my friends. So thank you, Bob, for sharing your insights here today. You know, here in Wakefield, Bob is just one example of how our community has been enriched by the contributions of our veterans. We see this positive influence in the pictures, in the profiles that grace the walls outside of this auditorium here today. I heard this influence earlier this week in the stories that some of our veterans shared at the Senior Center for a morning of breakfast and fellowship, and many of them are here today, and it's great to see you again. And we see it as well in the namesake of this very building, General John Rogers Galvin, who, as Chairman Consigliere mentioned, served in the military for 44 years, culminating in his service as Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. There's really no better example of what a Wakefield education and what our community means in terms of accomplishments. I could go on, but suffice it to say, these examples demonstrate that the debt of gratitude we owe to Wakefield's veterans is substantial. And so just as our community has been enhanced by these individuals and their selfless examples of service, we as a community need to commit to be of service to you as well, our cherished veterans, to remember and honor and recognize you, both today on Veterans Day and every other day of the year, to marshal our community's resources to support you, especially those of you continuing to struggle with both the seen and all too often unseen scars of combat, and to welcome your experience, your wisdom, and your insight into the conversations that guide and shape Wakefield's future. Thank you for being part of this ceremony today and for being part of our community. God bless you and the fallen brothers and sisters who aren't here today. We are forever grateful for your service, and we wish you all our best this Veterans Day and every Veterans Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Chines. Our next speaker is Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian. As our state representative, Kate ensures that the 32nd Middlesex District, which includes Melrose, parts of Wakefield, and Malden, is actively represented by someone who believes passionately about the role government can play in supporting individuals and their families. She listens carefully and works hard for her constituents. Please join me in welcoming Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very honored to be here today for this year's program. I want to thank my partners in the state legislature, Congressman Moulton, and the local leaders who are here showing their commitment to this community. Veterans Day serves as a time to celebrate and honor our veterans for their patriotism, selflessness, and service to our country. On this Veterans Day, I'm grateful to be with you all to honor all the veterans who came before us, those who stand alongside us, including in this room, and those who will follow us. This event serves as a meaningful opportunity to commemorate our veterans and their contributions and to show our appreciation to those who served, as well as their families, some of whom are on this stage with me today. Wakefield has a rich tradition of honoring and celebrating veterans, as Councilor Chines just mentioned, from the naming of this middle school to last year's Veterans Day, during which we gathered and rededicated Veterans Field with a new sign donated by Wakefield residents. To the veterans with us today, thank you. We appreciate and recognize your great sacrifice and appreciate the costs that often come with serving. Veterans Day, original Armistice Day, commemorates the end of World War I, as we've heard, and since then this day has evolved to recognize the heroism of all generations of veterans. The Commonwealth long has been a leader in supporting and honoring our service members and veterans, and we in the legislature remain committed to that work. I spoke at the Memorial Day ceremony here about the legislature's successful work last year to elevate veteran services to a cabinet-level position with a secretary, to address important quality of life issues for veterans and service members through the SPEED Act, and to create a Medal of Fidelity for the next of kin of Massachusetts service members who die as a result of service-connected diseases, conditions, and injuries, including PTSD, traumatic brain injury, or exposure to harmful toxins. Massachusetts continues to lead the way in providing financial benefits, social welfare programs, and other vital supports to veterans and their families. This July, the full legislature passed a fiscal year 24 budget with significant investments for the veteran community, including for mental health supports, including a Veterans in Crisis hotline, and service dogs for veterans, including some who visited us in the State House, which was a highlight, as well as the preservation of veterans' monuments, memorials, significant sites, and historic documents. I look forward to working with you and this community to continue to pass responsive, thoughtful state policy to fully honor our veterans and their families. Again, I want to underscore how grateful I am for the magnitude of the service and sacrifices of our veterans and of the families of these men and women. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian. Appreciate your coming. Our next speaker is Representative Donald Wong. Representative Wong serves in the 9th District, Essex District, and he thrives on connecting with his constituents in the community by visiting schools, businesses, and a host of town events in Wakefield, Saugus, and Lynn. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Representative Wong.
First, I want to apologize for being a little late for the ceremony, but I also want to thank Wakefield, all the councils that made this possible. Of course, we're here to honor our veterans, World War II, Korean, Vietnam, and you know, it's great that we in the Commonwealth do as much for our veterans as possible. I think we do more than any other state, and that's because of our state delegation that works very hard for. And we'll always be here for you. Please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Wong. Our next speaker is Senator Jason Lewis, representing the 5th Middlesex District, consisting of the cities of Malden and Melrose, and the towns of Reading and Stoneham and Wakefield, and parts of Winchester. Senator Lewis chairs the Senate Committee on Ethics and the Joint Committee on Education. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Senator Jason Lewis.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. It's certainly an honor to join with you as we express our gratitude and our deepest respect for our nation's veterans. And I do want to express a special appreciation to Congressman Moulton for being with us today. As many of you probably know, Congressman Moulton is a veteran, served in the United States Marines heroically. And I do think it is especially important that we have veterans who serve in government, especially in Congress, and have that experience that they can bring to our foreign policy and our national security debate. So thank you for the work you do. This is a difficult time for many people, both in our communities here and across the United States and indeed all over the world. Conflicts are raging in the Middle East, in Ukraine, and elsewhere, and they may seem distant, but they affect many of our neighbors, none more so than our military service members and their families who may receive orders to deploy at any time. I'm proud that we live in Massachusetts, a place that holds its veterans in the highest regard. Earlier this year, the Department of Veterans Services became a cabinet-level executive office, and now Secretary John Santiago reports directly to Governor Healy. This change, as Representative Lippert-Garabedian mentioned, was included as part of a new law that was enacted by our state legislature last summer. We also created a new Office of the Veteran Advocate, which is modeled after the Office of the Child Advocate, in order to be a strong voice across all of state government, all of our different agencies, for the welfare and the well-being of all of our veterans. We have invested in a new state-of-the-art long-term care facility at the Chelsea Veterans Home. And I'm not sure if you heard, but that just opened to new residents last month. And I'm hearing terrific reports of the quality of care being provided at that new facility. And also hundreds of millions of dollars in both state and federal funding has been secured to build a brand new Holyoke Veterans Home. The new facility will house 324 veterans and will also offer an adult day health program as well as many other services for veterans from across the entire state. This project is expected to be completed in 2028. And of course, there's always more that we need to be doing to support our veterans and their families. And I'm very pleased that Governor Healy recently filed, as was mentioned, legislation which I assure you will be taking a very close look at in the months ahead in the legislature. And hopefully we'll get that passed into law. So I'll close with the words of President John Kennedy, who said, quote, "As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them." Thank you very much, and happy Veterans Day.
Senator Jason Lewis, thank you very much. So we're going to do a little bit of a change here for the introduction of our honored guest. The town of Wakefield right now is fortunate to have an excellent veteran service officer. David Mangan is a Vietnam veteran who has assisted hundreds of veterans and their families to receive their earned benefits. David inspires our community to seek veteran participation in school programs, athletic events, and monthly coffees and programs at the Senior Center. Today, David Mangan will present 2 Republic of Korea Ambassador of Peace medals. The commemorative medal is an expression of appreciation from the Korean government to the American servicemen and women who served in the Korean War. The Ambassador for Peace medal was first presented to veterans as a special memento for those who returned to South Korea through the Revisit program. The honor has since expanded into Korean War veterans that cannot make the long journey to South Korea. The first Ambassador for Peace medal is presented to Staff Sergeant Chester Lee, Jr., who served in the United States Air Force. David? Assisting us with the presentation this morning is Congressman Seth Moulton. Ladies and gentlemen, Chester Lee, Jr. The second Ambassador for Peace, gentlemen, stand up, stay. Oh, okay.
They look alike, so maybe take the wrong one.
The second Ambassador for Peace medal is presented to Technical Sergeant Martin Venus. He served in the United States Army. Hold on, gentlemen. Congressman Moulton, Reverend Mortimer, and our Veteran Service Officer, David Mangan, are presenting the Medal of Fidelity to Susan E. Humphrey on behalf of her husband of 39 years, Stephen Arthur Humphrey, in the United States Navy. Stephen served in the United States Navy aboard the USS Cadmus from 1966 to 1970. Stephen passed in August of this year as a result of his injuries that he sustained while serving during the Vietnam era. Okay, gentlemen, you can take your seats. Susan, thank you for all that you've been through. Thank you very much. This morning, it's my honor to introduce our guest speaker, the Town of Wakefield Veterans Advisory Board unanimously selected Town Councilor Commander Robert E. Vincent II, Judge Advocate General Corps, United States Navy, retired, as our honored guest for Veterans Day 2023. Commander Robert E. Vincent II was born in East Boston and raised in Maryland. He received both his undergraduate degree and Juris Doctorate degrees from the University of Maryland. Commander Vincent served on active duty in the United States Navy Judge Advocate General's Corps from August of 1986 until his retirement in September 2013. Highlights from his extensive military career include his appointment as senior appellate judge on the Navy Marine Corps Court of Criminal Appeals and as the military justice expert in the Judge Advocate General's Inspector General's Office. Additionally, Commander Vincent has served as the first command judge advocate aboard the USS Harry S. Truman, CVN 75, as the staff judge advocate, United States Naval Activities in the United Kingdom, and worked with the Department of State Office of International Claims and Investment Disputes, where he represented the United States before the Iran-United States Claims Tribunal in The Hague in the Netherlands. His highest personal awards include the Legion of Merit, 4 Meritorious Service Medals, 4 Navy and Marine Corps Combination Medals, and 2 Navy Achievement Medals. Before we introduce him, I would like to pass the mic over to Congressman Seth Moulton for a few words.
Okay, thank you, Paul. This is perhaps a little bit awkward because we're excited to hear from him, and here you're stuck with me for for a few minutes. But look, it's an honor to be here with you today, and I just wanted to share a few thoughts as I've been thinking about my experience and so many in our community's experience with Veterans Day. I decided to sign up for the Marines a few months before 9/11. Thought I was joining a peacetime military. I remember flying down to Washington to start my training at Quantico, Virginia, driving in a white school bus past a gaping hole in the Pentagon. I'll never forget the days at OCS, at Officer Candidate School down in Quantico, where the drill instructors would ceremoniously dump our footlockers on the floor on a regular basis just so we would have the pleasure of picking everything back up. I'll never forget tramping through the woods of Quantico in the basic school to follow, where we learned land navigation. And one day I had my head buried in my compass and looked up, and there was a bear staring at me in the face. There was another lieutenant coming from another direction, and I was trying to think, well, do I tell that lieutenant, who also has his head buried in his compass, that he should look up because he's about to run into a bear, or should I let him run into the bear, because then that would end pretty well for me? I remember driving out to California to join my platoon, meeting these young Marines, most of them 18, 19 years old, and then boarding a ship just a few days later to head across the Pacific to Kuwait for the invasion of Iraq. I remember the night that Lance Corporal Massey in my platoon shot out the massive stern light on the Navy ship with his machine gun. The Navy was not happy about that. I remember the day that we were supposed to fly into Kuwait, and we sat on the flight deck for hours and hours and hours while a sandstorm rolled in and they said we couldn't get on the helicopters. Finally, at the end of the day, they said, we're not going to go today. You'll have to go tomorrow. So go in and get some chow. And we walked into the mess, the wardroom, and were met with some of the most surprised Navy faces I've ever seen in my life. Because all the sailors were enjoying steak and lobster for dinner, which they'd clearly saved for the night that the Marines left the ship. The next day we flew into Kuwait and we trained for weeks in the desert before the invasion of Iraq. And I'll never forget the first day that we invaded, where the most difficult part of literally crossing in to this foreign country was not fighting off Iraqis at the border. It was a classic American traffic jam, because there were so many of us trying to get through. I remember the days pushing north towards Baghdad. Few days we had where we just met cheering Iraqis. And it wasn't until a few days in that we actually had to fight. Every one of the experiences that I just recounted is easy to recount because they bring back good memories. And at no point in those experiences was I afraid for my life. There would be times to come where I would be very concerned about whether I might make it home or not. But the point is that through all that time, I wasn't worried. And yet back at home, my family was worried just about every minute. I didn't appreciate this until after my second deployment, when I was at home staying in my parents' house in my old bedroom, and I got a phone call that a good friend, one of my best friends from college, had been blown up in an IED. The report was that he was alive, but he'd probably lose the sight in one eye. And I'll never forget how helpless, how frightened I felt there at home, unable to do anything to help my friend. And it wasn't until that moment that I appreciated what my parents, my brother, my sister, my extended community went through every day that I was deployed, never knowing whether to worry or not. It wasn't until about 20 years after that that I got another new window into what our families go through when we're deployed. And that was when, as a member of Congress, in the midst of the debacle that was the withdrawal from Afghanistan, a fellow veteran from Michigan and I decided to go over to understand what was actually happening on the ground as we were trying to make decisions about it in Washington. Nobody had any idea, and we weren't getting answers from the administration. And so Peter Meyer from Michigan and I, both of whom had spent time in Afghanistan before, decided to fly over. It helped us understand what was going on and changed our minds about some decisions to make, and we were able to save a number of Afghan allies who were having trouble getting out before the Taliban hunted them down. But the night that I embarked on that unexpected deployment, I had a new thought, which was that if I don't make it back, it's not just bad for me or my parents. It's going to be really tough on my two little girls. And it wasn't until that moment that I fully appreciated what it was like to serve as a young Marine in my platoon who had kids, as many of those young Marines did, while I was this blissfully naive single lieutenant. My point with these stories is that as we get together today to honor our veterans, to thank them for their service, I hope we can all take a moment to thank the families for their service as well, for their sacrifices while we fought overseas, or while we just hung out overseas and had nothing to worry about. But you back home were worried every minute. It's so important to come together on Veterans Day, not just to honor it by watching a ceremony on TV, but to come together as a community, as so many of you have this morning. Thank you for being here, and thank you as a community for all of your service.
Congressman Moulton, thank you very much for those words. And I would ask if you just please rise as we welcome our town councilor, Commander Robert Vizin.
Thank you, Congressman. You took a Marine and thank you for the kind introduction. It is my honor and forgot I brought something. There you go. is my honor and privilege to address you on Veterans Day. I am truly humbled that the Wakefield Veteran Advisory Board invited me to be this year's keynote speaker. I want to extend my personal welcome to our three special guests here today. Since I've been sitting with them for the last hour, I feel comfortable saying thank you, Chester, Martin, and Susan. I'm honored to share the stage with you today. I extend a heartfelt welcome to all active duty service members, fellow veterans, Gold Star families, family members of veterans, and our legislative and local elected members and town officials here today. Let me also single out the children and the young adults who have gathered with us today. I speak for every veteran when I state that your presence and your presentation in this ceremony is highly regarded as a sign of your respect for us. Thank you. For the past 36 years, 26 on active duty and 10 since my retirement, fellow Americans have thanked me for my military service. And that is what service members do. We serve you and our nation. The 2023 Veterans Day theme is service. So I've decided to share a few examples of exemplary military service that resonated with me throughout my military career. First, the USS Samuel B. Roberts was a guided missile frigate that was homeported in Newport, Rhode Island. In late fall 1987, I was assigned to the Roberts for 2 weeks to assist with the ship's first pre-deployment preparation by completing last wills and testaments and powers of attorney for the crew. It was my first professional job as a Navy attorney. At the time, I had no idea that I was on board one of the finest vessels in the fleet with an outstanding crew and commanding officer, Captain Paul Wren, a commander at the time. Upon completing my 2-week assignment on board ship, I reported to the Naval Legal Service Office in Newport, where I had a desk job in a nice office overlooking Narragansett Bay. Meanwhile, the Roberts was embarking on an exceptionally challenging mission. Beginning in February 1988, the Roberts was in the Persian Gulf, escorting Kuwaiti-owned tankers from attack during the Iran-Iraq War as part of Operation Earnest Will. It was the first deployment for 2/3 of the crew. However, prior to deployment, Captain Ridd had implemented a highly regarded repair training program involving all crew members. On April 14, 1988, the ship entered into a minefield in the Persian Gulf and was struck by an underwater mine. The damage was devastating as the ship's superstructure was lifted up into the air and crashed down into the water. Flames shot up 100 feet. There was a 20-foot hole in the ship's hull. The engineering room was destroyed, resulting in a loss of power. The fire main needed to fight the fires on the ship, and most of the diesel engines, which are necessary to restore power, had been lost or severely damaged. A massive fire engulfed the Roberts, while seawater poured into the side of the ship. Despite the extensive damage, the Roberts was saved and there was no loss of life. Here are a couple of the critical measures undertaken during this incredible ordeal by Captain Wren and the crew. Captain Wren ordered all sailors to come topside before trying to back out of the minefield and prior to impact with the mine. The crew undertook a difficult maneuver to start the last remaining diesel engine and therefore restore power. Captain Wren realized the ship would sink before the fire could be put out and that water from the fire hoses, which were now working, were contributing to the flooding of the ship. He made a risky, but both a life-saving and ship-saving decision to temporarily stop fighting the fire and save the bulkhead by controlling the flooding first. Only then could the crew resume putting out the fire and successfully save the ship. Months later, when fleet engineers tried to simulate the damage done to the Roberts with their small model frigates, they reportedly could not do it without sending their models to the bottom of the water tank every time. The second example of exemplary military service is related to my experience on board the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Harry S. Truman CVN-75. I am a plank owner, which means I'm a member of the first crew of the Truman, and I was stationed on the carrier from September 1996 until shortly after her commissioning ceremony on July 25, 1998. In my capacity as the first lawyer assigned to the Truman, I had the privilege of establishing the legal office on board an aircraft carrier. I want to highlight the exemplary military service of one of my personal heroes, Captain Thomas Otterbein, the Truman's first commanding officer. During his extensive career as a naval aviator, he had 4,100 flight hours and landed an aircraft on board a carrier on 750 occasions. He had been the executive officer and acting commanding officer of the Navy Fighter Weapons School, commonly referred to as Top Gun. Indeed, he was the Top Gun of Top Gun. In addition to being an outstanding naval aviator, Captain Otterbein was a graduate of the Navy's nuclear power program. Therefore, he was qualified to command a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Captain Otterbein is one of the finest gentlemen I've ever met in my life. Highly accomplished, extremely intelligent, always composed, approachable, and kind. A leader in every sense of the word. When I reported in fall 1996, we were a small crew of a couple of hundred working out of an office building in Newport News, Virginia, while the Truman was under construction. Under Captain Otterbein's outstanding stewardship, a skeleton crew working out of a building in fall 1996 transformed into a fully manned, with a crew numbering in the thousands, an operational aircraft carrier by July 1998. This past July, the Truman celebrated its 25th anniversary. My third example of exemplary military service stems from my experience at the Pentagon immediately after 9/11. On 9/11, I was temporarily stationed in Crystal City, Virginia, less than a mile from the Pentagon, since our spaces at the Pentagon were being renovated. A few days later, I had a new mission: to participate in updating the Navy's Continuity of Operations program, COOP, which required me to spend a considerable amount of time in the Pentagon. COOP is the capability of the Navy to continue its military essential functions during a national security emergency. I had the honor to serve with naval personnel from all disciplines as we tirelessly worked on preparatory measures, response actions, and restoration activities designed to maintain military effectiveness, readiness, and survivability around the world. Every day, I was impressed with my colleagues' dedication to duty while working inside the Pentagon under very trying times. November is also National Family Caregiver Month. Continuing with the Veterans Day theme of service, it is important to acknowledge the critical service that thousands of family members and friends provide to veterans every day. My wife Tracy and I were stationed in Washington, D.C. when she suffered a serious stroke in 2007. Between 2007 and 2014, when I moved to Wakefield, I frequently took her to the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, for treatment. On every single visit, I witnessed family members tenderly caring for loved ones who suffered serious and debilitating mental and physical injuries during Operation Iraqi Freedom. As a Medal of Fidelity recipient, I publicly acknowledge the critical care that Susan provided to her husband, Stephen. Considering that we are blessed to have Korean War veterans with us today, let me close with a shining example of a community's exemplary service to one of our own. I take you back 70 years ago to Wakefield on September 25th, 1953. On that day, Master Sergeant John O'Keefe, United States Army, 37 years old, returned home after 33 months as a POW during the Korean War. He was greeted at the airport by his wife and 4 children, ages 6 to 12, his father, 2 sisters, members of the Wakefield POW Welcome Home Committee, and Wakefield's Veteran Service Officer. The Wakefield Police Department provided a 10-car motorcade escort from Logan Airport to Wakefield. Beginning at the Melrose Line on Main Street, fire department personnel joined the motorcade, and with horns sounding, Master Sergeant O'Keefe, at his request, was taken to St. Joseph's Parochial School to thank the sisters for the religious medals and the students for the written prayers they sent him while he was a POW. After a very brief stop at home, Master Sergeant O'Keefe visited his mother's grave. Unfortunately, she had passed away in January, but he had only found out 2 days earlier upon his release. He was then taken to Veterans Field for a welcome home ceremony and presented a key to the town. An estimated 3,000 people, and I note that Wakefield had a population of under 20,000 in 1950, so that means 1 in 7 residents. An estimated 3,000 people cheered Master Sergeant O'Keefe's return, by lining Wakefield streets in order to watch the motorcade and attend the Veterans Field ceremony. When we as a community ask what we can do for active duty service members and veterans, in addition to thanking him or her for their service, let's remember the remarkable events that took place in our town on September 25th, 1953. Commander Shelby Nicotin, United States Navy, a Wakefield native, is the commanding officer of the USS Thomas Hudner, a destroyer. Today, she and her crew are on an extended deployment in harm's way. When she returns to her family in our hometown, let's ensure that we extend our sincere appreciation to her and all of our mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters who are currently serving our great nation and protecting our freedom. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my thoughts and experiences on this very special day.
I'm going to ask Congressman Moulton and Councilor Vincent to come back up. I do have something for you, and Councilor Chines, if you can also join me here. These are two veterans who have shared their service experiences in the military, and I do have a gift, a personal gift for each one of them. Knowing that both of you are avid readers, I felt it appropriate to present you with a recently published work, Lady of the Army, The Life of Mrs. George S. Patton. Belgian author Stephanie von Steelant worked closely with the Patton family archives and recently deceased Joanne Holbrook Patton for many years to complete this story. I hope you enjoy the tribute to Beatrice Ayer Patton, and both of you always have an open invitation to tour the Patton Family Library and Archives in Hamilton, Massachusetts. So I just want to present that to you. That's autographed by... Thank you. We're also privileged to have the award-winning Wakefield Memorial High School Wind Ensemble under the direction of Mr. Thomas Bankert. The Wind Ensemble will now perform the Armed Forces Pride of America, and we invite our veterans to stand when they hear their service songs. Thank you to the award-winning wind ensemble performance. Mr. Bankert, thank you. Thank you very much for your continued support throughout the years. Next up, we got the Boy Scouts from Troop 701. You guys ready? There we go. As they're coming down, the Boy Scouts from Troop 701 will place a wreath in front of the podium. Wreaths symbolize victory, bravery, and peace. And in the military, the tradition of wreath-laying ceremonies reflects reverent gesture marking sacred ground. This memorial auditorium at the General Galvin Middle School is one of those places of honor. As we entered, we remembered those who are currently serving, as well as those men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice. Ladies and gentlemen, let's join me in remembering the recently departed Lieutenant Harold McCoffey from the 2nd Battalion, 327th Infantry, 101st Airborne Division, and also Stephen Arthur Humphrey, United States Navy. Both served during the Vietnam era. Please rise and join me in a moment of silence as the wreath is presented in remembrance of those veterans who are no longer with us. Caroline Dill and Lila Hathaway will now play taps. Reverend Mortimer, please join us for the benediction.
As you depart our ceremony this morning, I would call us that remembrance isn't for a day, it is for a lifetime. Let us be in prayer. God of all, remember your holy promise and look with love on all your people, living and departed. On this day, we especially ask that you would hold forever all who have suffered during war, those who returned scarred by warfare, those who waited anxiously at home, and those who returned wounded and disillusioned, those who mourned, and those communities that were diminished and suffered loss. Remember also those who acted with kind compassion, those who bravely risk their own lives for their comrades, and those who, in the aftermath of war, work tirelessly for a more peaceful world. As you remember them, remember us, O Lord. Grant us peace in our time and a longing for the day when people of every language, race, and nation will be brought into the unity of your kingdom. I pray this day in the name of our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. And thank you for being here today. Color Guard, prepare to retrieve the colors.
Color Guard attention. Color Guard advance. Color Guard honor the colors. Color Guard retire the colors. Color Guard dismissed.
Please take your seats. Just a couple events that are coming up in the future. The next public event, sponsored by the Wakefield Veterans Advisory Board, is Wreath Day on Saturday, December 16, 2023, at 12 noon. There will be a ceremony in the location of Forest Glade Cemetery on Lowell Street. If you'd like to honor a veteran, to remember, honor, and teach, there are forms available at the exits with instructions on how to purchase a wreath through Wreaths Across America. A little bit further down the road, in February of 2024, we celebrate Four Chaplains Day. Next year it'll be celebrated on Saturday, February 3rd, 2024, at 9 o'clock in the morning at the Four Chaplains Monument in front of Temple Emmanuel. At that ceremony, we reflect those lives that were lost on the USS Dorchester. I just want to leave you with a final thought. A final thought about American military service. Global tensions are definitely running high, with wars in Eastern Europe, Sudan, and the Middle East. The men and women in the armed forces are working around the clock to support our allies and protect our nation. In February, as I departed the USS Thomas Hudner on a family and friends cruise of this past year, I received a note from the commander. Commander Shelby Nicotin, who was mentioned here today, is a graduate of Wakefield Memorial High School, class of 2000. And she shared a very simple sentiment. We could not do what we do without the incredible support from our family and friends. She writes, "It is an honor to share every day at sea with all of you. Above all others, sincerely yours, Shelby Nickerton, Commander, USS Thomas Hudner. Thank you. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our elected representatives, our first responders. Mr. Bankert, thank you very much for what you do with music and our school children. I want to thank the Department of Public Works for completing the journey of the service flags throughout Wakefield this past week. I also want to thank WCAT for filming this event. Most importantly, a very special thanks to our veterans and their families for their service to our nation. Happy Veterans Day. I want to welcome all of you to join us for a quick collation in the cafeteria following the program. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.